Pwede pong isang question, then one follow-up. Ngayon, if you would like to have questions pa, na minsan medyo ma-weak yung signal nyo, you can chat it na lang muna, then we'll read it as we go along. So with that, General Arevalo, sir, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to present to you and give the floor to our spokesperson, Major General Edgard Arevalo. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Captain Jake, the Chief AFP Public Affairs Office, our friends in media. Magandang hapon. I am going to present to you a briefing as to the AFP preparations with regard to the vaccine rollout. And I'll also discuss to you the guidelines set forth by the AFP Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobihana, as regards the vaccination rollout among members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, to include uniformed personnel and civilian members of the civilian human resource. In a nutshell, the AFP remains to be on the support role sa vaccine rollout ng ating pamahalaan para sa ating mga kababayan. Tatlo ang major roles na ipinapaloob sa Armed Forces. Una, yung security support operations. Ikalawa, yung medical support operations. At ikatlo, yung logistical support operations. Under the security support, tayo po ay magiging kaakibat at kaagapay ng Philippine National Police sa pagbibigay ng seguridad sa pagtatransport ng bakuna, sa pagdadala nito doon sa mga vaccination centers, doon mismo sa pagsasagawa ng pagbabakuna sa vaccination centers and the likes. Ikalawa, in terms naman po of medical support operations, kung kakailanganin pa po ang tulong ng ating medical health practitioners, ang ating mga frontliners, doktor at nurses sa actual na pagkakandak ng pagbabakuna, meron po tayong kahandaan upang tumulong hinggil sa bagay na yan. At ikatlo, yung logistical support operations, of course, tutulong naman po tayo sa pagsisiguro ng ating mga bakuna ay hindi masasayang. Kasama na rin po dyan yung ating paghahatid ng mga bakuna gamit ang mga sasakyang pandagat, panghimpapawid at panlupa ng Sandatahang Lakas ng Pilipinas, sapagkat ito po ang malaking inaasahan na may contribute natin sa overall rollout ng ating vaccine, sapagkat alam naman po natin sa sandali na umalis ang mga ito, buhat doon sa mga cold storage facilities patungo sa mga designated vaccination sites, ang number ng oras at minuto sa mga kababayan. So in a nutshell, yan po ang tatlong malalaking support roles na gagawa ng lakas ng Pilipinas. Ngayon, higil naman po sa pagbabakuna ng ating mga miyembro ng Sandatahang Lakas ng Pilipinas, meron po tayong 304 na AFP medical service personnel na conduct na po ng mga simulation exercises para sa ating gagawing sariling pagbabakuna sa ating mga miyembro ng Sandatahang Lakas. In-identify na rin po natin ang mga vaccination sites. At sa katunayan, ang Biluna Medical Center at ang State Hospital ay nagsagawa na po ng simulation exercise sa February 10. Meron po tayong 3 phases ng vaccination, yung pre-implementation, implementation phase, and the post-implementation phases. Meron po tayong kabuuan na 72 vaccination teams na binuo. Meron din po tayong 47 o 47 vaccination sites in AMP camps with military treatment facilities. Samantala, yung mga kampo naman po na walang MTF or military treatment facility, ang ating pong default ay makipag-coordinate sa mga local government units at sa Department of Health para dun sa mga area hospital na pwede nating isagawa yung pagbabakuna. Hinggil naman po sa bakuna na inilaan para sa Sandatahang Lakas ng Pilipinas, ang gusto po naming sabihin, we are thankful to the donor or to those who will still like to donate vaccines for the Armed Forces of the Philippines. We see this as a kind gesture of a recognition for the importance of the role that we play in overall campaign to combat the spread of COVID-19 and in the vaccine rollout to our kababayans. Ikalawa, we are neither competing nor rushing for priority in availing of these vaccines. Tayo po ay naliligayahan na kung ano po ang may pagkakaloob sa Armed Forces of the Philippines in order to capacitate us to perform our delicate task. Ito nga pong pagtulong sa paglaban sa pandemya na nagsimula pa noong isang taon, 2020. Tayo po ay makikiisa and we will abide by the National Inoculation Program that intends to attain the so-called herd or population immunity from COVID-19. Subalit, para po maging handa tayo na tukdin ang mga tungkulin na yon, kailangan pong mabakunahan ng miyembro ng armed forces para hindi na po tayo makadaragdag pa na maging pabigat o magsilbing makapagpa-complicate pa ng problema kung ang mga sundalo mismo sa pagtupad ng tungkulin ay sila pa ang magiging dahilan na ma-infeksyon o kumalat ang COVID-19 habang ginagawa nila ang kanilang tungkulin o uuwi sila sa kanilang mga tahanan pagkatapos ng pagtupad nila sa kanilang mga tungkulin. Thus, to get inoculated or not is not an option for the members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. It is a duty. At the most, the exercise of option will be the option as to what brand of vaccine they will be availing of, but the cost of which will not be paid by the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Sa makatuwid, kung gusto nila ng ibang brand ng bakuna na ituturok sa kanila, bukod o hindi doon sa bakuna na inilaan para sa AFP, sa uniform personnel, particular ang Sinovac, pwede po niyang piliin kung anong brand na gusto niya, subalit siya po ang magbabayad ng halaga ng bakuna na yon. As a matter of policy, AFP personnel may opt for vaccines vaccine brands other than Sinovac, which should be available for uniform personnel. But as I said, their cost, it is going to be at their cost, and they should get the vaccine of their choice as soon as possible. The Chief of Staff has declared, and he said, and I quote, "At the end of the day, all or every AFP personnel and their immediate dependents must be vaccinated." AFP personnel who opt for another vaccine brand who have not been inoculated dahil ayaw muna nila yon, meron silang particular na vaccine na gusto, hindi po pwede na hindi sila, pwede nilang gawing mamili, subalit pag sa oras na sila ay kailangan na mag-duty o perform yung duty na sinasabi natin, kagaya sa frontliners, sa mga checkpoints o sa pag-roll out ng mga bakuna, hindi po siya pwedeng hindi tutupad sa vaccine, sa mga duties na yon. They must perform their duties and tasks, but they will have to resort to the traditional health protocol, mag-mask, mag-shield, maghugas ng kamay, at mag-maintain ng social distances pansamantala habang hindi pa sila natuturukan ng vaccine na pinipili nila. Ganun pa man, yun pong mga AFP personnel na naka-assign at directly performing duties na exposed sa mga COVID-19 patients, kailangan mag-avail na po kagad sila ng bakuna kung ano yung available, which is Sinovac, for them to be protected in that particularly dangerous or perilous setting. Sabi nga ng ating Chief of Staff, it's better to be 50.4% protected, that is in case of those who are exposed sa mga COVID-19 patient, than not having any protection at all. Ganun pa man, yung gusto pong mag-avail, again, ng ibang vaccine brand na gusto nila, they may do so, but they must be inoculated immediately bago nila i-perform yung duty na kailangan nilang gawin doon sa sinasabi nating direct contact with those COVID-19 patients. So, sino po ang magmomonitor nito? Ang mga unit commanders ng Armed Forces of the Philippines, Sila po ang inaatasan ng ating Chief of Staff na mag-monitor ng pagbabakuna at siguruhin na lahat ng kanilang mga personnel sa kanilang nasasakupan ay nabakunahan ng Sinovac, which is the one provided for military personnel, or the brand of vaccines of their choice, provided that they pay at the soonest possible time. Bottom line po, it is a duty for military personnel, including civilian human resource, to be vaccinated, whether we avail of the brand that we like or what is the brand given to us. But we must take the vaccine without delay once that the rollout has started. Ito naman po ay ayon na rin at consistent sa national government inoculation policy, which is to attain the so-called herd or population immunity. So far, yan po ang initial na mga information na meron ako na pwedeng ilahad sa inyo. Kung meron po kayong katanungan, I'm ready to answer your questions. Captain Zata.
Maraming salamat po, sir. As what was mentioned by the spokesperson, the floor is now open. Please virtually or raise your hand so that you would be recognized for you to ask your question. Who would like to ask the first question? I can see Miss Romina of Philstar to be followed by David Santos. Romina, go ahead, please.
Hi sir, magandang hapon po mga sir. I wanted to ask, po ba tayong nakikitang timeline? Kailan po mabavaccinate lahat ng AFP personnel? Are we eyeing this year or next year? Meron po ba tayong timeline? Thank you po.
Thank you, Rubina. Susundin pa rin natin yung tinatawag natin susundin pa rin natin yung prioritization na inilatag ng national government with regard to vaccination, which includes, nandun tayo, I understand, sa priority, sa bagong listahan ng prioritization, nandun tayo sa priority A4, kung saan kasama kaya depende po sa pagsapit ng mga bakuna sa atin. Sabi ko nga po kanina, hindi po tayo makapag-unahan sa ating mga kababayan kung ano po yung maging available ng sundalo para doon sa mga grupo within the members of the armed forces na nasa sa priority kagaya ng mga medical health frontliners natin, sila po ang una nating bibigyan ng bakuna.
Okay, Romina, do you have a follow-up question? Naka-mute ka, Romina, before we call on David. Okay? Romina, naka-mute ka. Sige, go ahead, Romina, for your follow-up.
Baka wala na.
Wala na. O sige, sir. We see David Santos, then to be followed by Chino Gaston. David, you're recognized. Go ahead, please.
Follow-up po hindi pa rin po sa rollout yung type. Hello, sir? Sir, okay na po?
Si Romina ba uli yun?
Mukhang mahina sir yung signal ni Romina. Romina, i-type mo na lang yung follow-up question mo. Then we'll ask that later on or shortly. For the meantime, kung hindi pa makapasok si David, okay ka na ba?
I'm here, sir. I'm here. David.
Oh, go ahead, David, for your question.
Sir, elaborate lang, sir, yung Sinovac inoculation, sir, because we understand SND had explained na 100,000 will be allocated for DND and its attached bureaus, excluding AFP. Tapos yung 500,000, hindi pa malinaw, sir, kung ito ba, kasi I'm referring to the 600,000 na donation ng Chinese government. Kayo po ba, ang AFP, sir, makakasama doon sa 500,000, sir, doses na hiwalay doon sa 100,000 na inallocate sa DND, sir? Saan po magagaling yung doses na you're referring to as Sinovac, sir? And then I have a follow-up question, sir, later.
Okay, David. Ang pagkakaunawa ko, tama yung sinabi mo initially, na sabi ng ating butihing kalihim ng tanggulang pambansa ay sa DND personnel yung 100,000 na donated doon. But hindi ko lang nasisiguro up to now kung may pagbabago, but I understand na magkakaroon yata ng pagbabago yon at magkakaroon ng bahagi doon ang armed forces. Hintayin na lang natin kung anong magiging final announcement ng Department of National Defense hinggil sa bagay na yon. Now, tungkol naman doon sa natitirang 500,000 ng Sinovac na para sa ating mga kababayan, ang pagkaunawa po namin sa Sandatang Lakas ng Pilipinas ay magkakaroon po ng pag-aaral, yung task group ng ating gobyerno, at aalamin po nila kung ilan ang pwede na spare from that number, could be spared sa mga uniformed personnel, which will include the members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines, David.
Okay, sir. Sir, a follow-up question lang po. As you pointed out, sir, it will be mandatory for our members of the armed forces, sir. They can choose their brand, but they cannot refuse to be inoculated. Sir, ang tanong ko po is, some experts are saying, well, most experts are saying, kaya hindi pa nila ginagawang mandatory, voluntary lang, sir, ang vaccination because there is no sufficient data yet to show that all of these vaccines can actually be a basis for mandatory. Unlike, sir, mga vaccines, sir, for polio, for alam mo yung mga matagal ng pinag-aralan, pwede maging mandatory. Ito raw, sir, worldwide, hindi pa nila ginagawang mandatory kasi yun nga, dahil wala pang sapat na pag-aaral. So tayo, sir, we're willing to take that risk, sir, na parang will not toe the line. Ano yung mga recommendation ng global experts? And then pangalawang question with that, attached to that, sir, magkakaroon ba ng consent form, sir, yung ating mga members ng armed forces if in case magpapabakuna po sila?
Okay. Thank you for the string of follow-up questions, David. Una sa lahat, we do not want to tread on the line of the experts with regard to ano ang pwedeng ibigay at anong pwede at anong hindi. But so far as we're concerned, the emergency use authorization has been issued, and from little that I know about it, ang kulang lang kaya yung EUA hindi maging approval is because hindi nga lahat ng mga parameters that are necessary to get that approved ay available sa ngayon sa FDA, but there are sufficient reason and justifications to believe na itong vaccine na ito ay nakagaling at nakagagaling o nakatutulong sa pag-combat. At sa panahon ng emergency, kagaya ng pandemya na hinaharap natin ngayon, emergency use authorization may be issued. Hence, ay issue na po ng EUA. Ikalawa, ang Sandatang Lakas ng Pilipinas po is not like any ordinary organization. Tayo po ay nasa service-oriented organization. Tayo po ang inaasahan sa napakaraming mga mabibigat na tungkulin, kagaya nga po ng pagharap sa pandemya, as early as 2020. That is why sinabi natin na hindi option ang pag-ayaw. Subalit kinikilala natin yung kanilang kagustuhan na mabakunahan ng brand na gusto nila. But as we were saying, ito po ay kailangan sila ang sasagot sapagkat meron naman pong bakuna na available. At ayun pong pinag-uusapan natin na 50.4 efficacy, ayun ay para lamang doon sa mga directly na nakaharap o in touch or physically attending to COVID-19 pandemic patients, I should say. Ayoko nang banggitin yung iba pang justification ng Sinovac so that I will not sound like I'm the one promoting them. But in a nutshell, yan po ang mga kadahilanan. Since it's not a matter of option, we are going to inform them and notify them. That's why yung sinabi ko kanina, pre-implementation phase, implementation phase, and post-implementation phase nitong ating pagbabakuna, kasama po sa pre-implementation phase yung troop information and education, kagaya ng na-feature mo sa isang mga balita na nagkakandak tayo ng troop information and education. We have to tell them. And this the guidelines of the AFP Chief of Staff na binasa ko kanina will be an integral part ng mga i-disseminate natin sa tropa. Kagaya ng sinabi natin, kailangan mabakunahan ang lahat ng sundalo sapagkat kami ang inaasahan na tutulong ng malaki sa pag-roll out nito. At hindi lang yan, sa paglaban mismo sa anti-COVID-19 pandemic operations na ginagawa natin since 2020, yes, so kailangan ma-inoculate tayo. Pero ginagalang natin yung kanilang kagustuhan, yung meron silang random gusto, as we said earlier.
Thank you, sir.
Salamat, David.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, David. We recognize Chino Gaston to be followed by Christian Manyo of DZRH. Chino, you're recognized. Go ahead, please, with your question.
Good afternoon, General. Sir, nabanggit kanina natin na mandatory siya. No? So, ano ang consequences sa ating mga sundalo na hindi o ayaw magpa-vaccinate? And corollary to that, yung sinasabing option na pwede kang pumili ng own vaccine mo, knowing that yung Sinovac pa lang talaga mukhang magiging available for AFP. May parang period ba sila na pagbibigyan na habang naghahanap sila ng ibang brand? Sige, sir. Yung una muna, sir, yung consequence.
Thank you. Well, una, syempre, we are an organization under military regulations. No? So, ang pagtupad sa mga regulasyon o tinatadhana ng existing legal orders buhat sa ating mga superiors, just like this one, coming from the AP Chief of Staff, no less, will be dealt with disciplinary actions kung hindi nila susundin. But we are confident hindi na tayo darating sa punto na yon sapagkat ipaliliwanag nating mabuti na sa hinggil sa hinaharap nating uri ng trabaho at ang mga importanteng misyon na iniaatang sa ating mga balikat at meron naman na available na vaccine, wala tayong nakikitang dahilan upang ito ay hindi natin i-avail. Ganun pa man, kung gusto nating mag-avail talaga ng isang brand, pwede naman, but you have to pay for it. And dapat, yung vaccine na yun will be already available. Kasi kung hindi, you may have to revert to the first option, which is being inoculated with Sinovac na nandirito na, parating na sa malapit na ilang araw. Ang mahalaga dito, Chino, as we do in our organization, where compliance is a way of life, we always conduct troop information and education in order to inform our personnel about the whys, wherefores, and reasons kung bakit meron tayong ganitong polisiya. Again, polisiya na dito, kapagkat nakita naman natin, base sa pag-aaral, mabisa naman itong vaccine na ating pinag-uusapan. Yung 50.4, baka kailangan ipaliwanag lamang na mabuti, ay doon lamang sa mga directly na humaharap sa mga COVID-19 patients. But other than that, I understand, mas mataas. Napakataas pa rin. So kailangan natin lamang siyang ipaliliwanag. Yung timetable should be immediate. Sapagkat habang lalong-lalo na yung sinasabi nating upper percentile ng ating AFP strength na direkta na matutok pa sa trabaho ng COVID-19 pandemic, combating the pandemic, anti-COVID-19 operations at rollout na ng mga bakuna nito. Kaya sinasabi natin, tutulong tayo, gagawin natin ang lahat ng magagawa natin para matulong sa National Immunization Program. Pero ayaw natin na tayo ang magiging sanhi ng pagkahawa at pagkalat ng SARS-CoV-2 virus dahil tayo mismo ay hindi nagpabakuna at hindi tumupad sa hinihiling ng National Immunization Program na magkaroon tayo ng herd or population immunity.
Sir, follow up lang, sir. Alam naman natin kung inaasahan natin yung 500 to have a portion of the 500,000 doses na idodonate or papasok ng bansa from Sinovac. Hindi naman lahat yun mapupunta sa AFP. So, ang atin bang prioritization ay still the same, our frontliners, to include the upper hierarchy? Ano bang mauuna, sir? At ano ba yung... Kasi ang last count natin, 180,000 personnel tayo. So, sino yung magiging priority nito? Kasama ba yung parang J-Command as priority or yung frontliners lang talaga?
Tinatawag natin primos inter pares, kung sino yung una ang priority. Kung kasama sa priority 4 within armed forces, within the armed forces, at tayo priority. At ang priority natin are medical health frontliners. So hindi ang chief of staff, hindi ang joint staff, hindi ako, o hindi yung mga unified commanders yet. Unless and until those whom I mentioned ay talagang performing medical health frontliner functions. But outside of that, kahit yan ay enlisted personnel, kahit yan ay civilian employee, kahit yan ay low-ranking military officer, sila ang pangunahin natin bibigyan ng bakuna dahil ang ating consideration, primary consideration, is the role that they perform. Kaya nga po, yung aspeto ng hindi pwedeng mamili is because of the role that we perform. Kaya naman po yun natin tinitreat yung polisiyan.
Thank you, Chino.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before we call on Christian Manyo of DCRH, the next to ask this question after Christian Manyo would be Rod Vega. Christian, if you're ready, go ahead with your question and your follow-up, please.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, General Arevalo. Sir, question lang. Montulfo said yesterday, when he was inoculated last year, may kasama siyang police and military. May details.
Christian, sorry, let me start.
Hello, General. Is it clear na?
Yes, please.
All right. Montulfo said yesterday when he was inoculated last year, may kasama siyang police and military. May details po ba tayo dito? Sino po sila and meron po ba tayong investigation?
Narinig pa lang natin yung balita na yan, Christian. Allow us to look into that, at magbibigay tayo ng mga additional na information sa ating mga nakatataas sa atin at alamin natin kung may reason para magkandak tayo ng investigation.
Pero sir, so far wala pa tayong any information aside from PSG na nabakunahan kontra COVID-19?
Wala pa po. At again, nabanggit nyo rin lang po ang PSG, yun po is in compliance to their role to protect the president from any and all harm, including SARS-CoV-2 virus and among themselves as well, na maaaring na-infect at ma-infect din nila ang ating commander-in-chief.
Thank you, General. Good afternoon.
Salamat, Christian.
Okay, Christian. Have time for those who ask their questions to sa chat natin. So, Rod Vega, if you're okay na, please go ahead.
Sir, good afternoon, Captain Sata. Good afternoon, General Arevalo, sir.
Hapon.
Sir, nababanggit nyo kanina dun sa mga sundalo na ayaw magpabakuna is they will meet disciplinary action, parang ganon?
Tama po.
Apo. Can you elaborate anong parusa in particular?
Pwedeng violation, pwedeng mapani sila under Article of War 105, which is commanding officers' disciplinary powers.
Sir, doon sa yung phase natin ng implementation, nagkaroon ba tayo ng pagtatanong kung ilan sundalo dyan sa IFP ang willing at hindi magpapakuna?
Sa totoo lang, Rudil, wala akong alam na meron tayong canvas na kagaya niyan. But as we understand, sa lahat naman po ng society, organization o institution, lagi po tayong merong mga dissenting opinion, meron pong nag-aagam-agam, pero sa amin po, sa Tandathang Lakas ng Pilipinas, kung saan sinasabi po lagi ng iba ang mantra daw po ay obey first before you complain. Lamang po, dito po ng process, when we make decisions, especially our high-level commanders, nagtatalo rin po tayo, nagdidiskusyon po tayo, dumarating po tayo sa mga mainit na pagtatalo, debate, subalit pagdating po sa dulo, after na marinig ng commander ang mga various inputs and different staff sa kanilang desk yung personnel, intelligence, operations, logistics, and all, at na po yung mga reason na yan at nag-decide na po ang commander base sa kanyang informed decision, then that becomes
Apo.
guidance that everybody must follow.
Ay. Sir, last lang po. Pakiulit po, ano po yung article of war, particular?
Article of War 105.
105.
Disciplinary actions of a commanding officer.
Thank you, General Arevalo. Thank you, Captain Sato, sir.
Thank you, Rod. Thank you, sir. So, sir, we'll read the questions na sinend through chat, after which we'll be calling on Chara Zambrano for her questions. So, the first one that we see in our chat comes from Melo Acuña, and he asks, how many AFP elements and their dependents are scheduled to receive the jab? Then second, what about those assigned to far-flung areas? Will the AFP still permit the use of facilities as inoculation centers? Isang bagsakan na lang po, General Arevalo, sir.
Okay. Magandang hapon po, Pamelo. Hindi po sa tanong ninyo, ang atin pong binibilang ay yung pong mga frontliners and then miyembro ng kanilang pamilya. Sapagkat ito pong ating mga frontliners na ito, pagkatapos ng kanilang duty, owing to the nature of the task na binigay sa kanila, hindi na po sila nagre-report diretso sa headquarters or not that frequent anymore. They go back to their families. And that being the case, it is just within what is encapsulated doon po sa National Inoculation Program. Dapat sila po ay vaccinated rin because there's the family that they go to. Dahil kung hindi, then we are defeating the purpose. Yun na po namang mga nasa sa malalayong lugar natin, kung ano po ang role nila, kung sila po ay magiging medical health frontliners, then they will have to be inoculated. And then yung tungkol naman po doon sa mga facilities natin, pinili na po natin, Camelo, kung alin po yung mga military camps natin na mayroong military treatment facilities ang pwede nating gamitin. At kagaya po na nabanggit ko kanina, yun po ay umaabot sa bilang na 47. Amen. Salamat po.
Thank you, sir. And another question before we call on Chara Zambrano. This time, the question comes from Faith Del Mundo. Although yung first question niya, sir, nasagot nyo na kung nakapag-survey na ba tayo, kung ilan ang papayag na kukuha ng... hindi, ibang question pala to, sir. So allow me to read it. Nakapag-survey na po ilan ang papayag magpabako ng Sinovac o ng pang-brand o ng ibang brand ng bakuna. And then her follow-up is, as of the moment sa AFP, ilan po ang nagkaroon ng COVID-19 virus?
Sige, yung pangalawang tanong, kunin ko muna yung bagong data, no? Probably you can help me there, Captain Zata, no? Paki-forward na lang sa akin. Yung unang tanong, kapareho po ng nauna nating sagot kanina, wala po tayong nagawang canvas, hindi sa kung sino ang ayaw, kung sino ang gusto, o ilan ang nag-opt sa ibang brand ng bakuna. No? Wala po tayong ganong survey.
Salamat po. At this juncture, we'll call on Chara. Chara, you are recognized. Go ahead with your question and follow up.
Sir, hindi
Hello,
sana
ma'am.
ito yung tanong ko pero...
Ma'am, nag-email sa akin si Sir Klink. Sinisi sa akin, kasi ini-insist ng Koreano na ano daw,
Dempsey, paki-mute
sorry,
mo yun.
oh my God, sorry.
Okay, commercial break daw po yun, sir. Para masyadong seryoso daw. Kaya
wait lang, sorry, oh my God.
I-mute mo na kasi. Okay, Chara, that's the commercial break. It's now your turn. Go ahead.
Okay, salamat sa intermission number. Di sana ito yung tanong ko, sir, pero parang kailangan ko lang pong linawin ulit. Dun sa 500,000, meron ba kayong requested na bilang na sana ay i-allot for the AFP? Ayun, yun po muna sana, sir. Tapos yung next question.
Shara, wala po tayong particular na nire-request o bilang man na nire-request sapagkat alam po natin yung 500,000 ay nakalaan para sa kabuuan ng ating populasyon. Kaya po sabi namin kanina, we are neither rushing for priority, nor trying to be ahead of the line. Kung ano po ang may pagkaloob sa atin sa armed forces, considering the roles and functions they're giving us in this pandemic, masaya po nating tatanggapin yun. Nagpapasalamat po tayo.
Is that a change in plans, or was the 500,000 initially earmarked for the AFP tapos ni-revise lang yung plano, o talagang labo-labo, wala pang allotment?
Ang totoo siya national government po yan eh. Hindi po yan sa AFP. So I'm not competent to answer that question.
Sir, yung second na tanong ko, sir, is yung how will you address the seeming conflict of interest that will arise when you have your forces, you have your troops inoculated by vaccines that are donated by the government of China? I mean, lagi naman sinasabi ng gobyerno na the West Philippine Sea does not encompass the entire relations between the two countries. Pero on the military front, China is your biggest external adversary, and yet sila yung magbabakuna sa inyo. So, paano po natin i-address yung magiging conflict of interest? Nakikita ni Manamir.
Sa amin po sa armed forces, hindi po naman namin yung tinutuloy na conflict of interest. Pagkat unang-una, yan po ay bakuna. Yan po ay pangailangan ng sino mang Pilipino. At yan po ay kung i-donate po yan sa armed forces,
paki-mute na lang yung Mr. Melo Acuna, please. Mukhang naka-on yung sound mo, please. Admin natin, paki-mute muna si Melo. Okay. That's another commercial break for Chara, courtesy of Melo naman. Kaya, sir, go ahead. Pasensya na po.
Conflict of interest. Binanggit ko po kanina na hindi po natin yung tinuturing na gano'n. Sapagkat para po sa Armed Forces of the Philippines, yan po ay bakuna, yan po ay napakahalaga para sa amin sa Armed Forces para mas makatulong tayo to capacitate, equip, and allow us to be able to perform. So, yan po ay kinikilala natin dito bakuna. Hindi ang bakay ng gagawin ng bansa. Hindi po yan natin kinukonsidera na isang bagay na nanggagaling sa isang bansa na tinuturing na binabanggit po ninyo na isang adversaryo.
Salamat, sir, at salamat sa mga pa-intermission number.
Salamat, sir. Salamat, Chara. Salamat, Dempsey at saka Camelo. Salamat. I think the last hand that we see on our screen comes from Rambo. Rambo, your question and your follow-up, please. Go ahead.
Hello, General. Si Rambo Talabang po from Rappler. Pretty technical question, sir, dito sa paggawa niyo mandatory sa vaccination, sir. May basis na po ba tayo or verbal order pa lang ito?
Sa armed forces, if it is an order expressed orally, that is the same force in effect of an order in writing. Especially so na ang guidance po na ito ay galing mismo sa ating AFP Chief of Staff kay Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobihana. Nabanggit na po natin kanina kung ano mga reasons behind making this mandatory vaccination, but they can exercise their option to choose what vaccine brand they would prefer for, and that it will be at their cost.
Mm-hmm. Sir, may follow-up naman is dun sa prioritization within the AFP. Kasi sir, sa local government units, hindi nga sila na national government ng priority lists. In effect, may ganoon din bang tinanong sa AFP yung mga priority soldiers na gusto nyo bigyan ng vaccines para patulungan din yung national government for the distribution of vaccines? That's my last question, sir.
Thank you, Rambo. We have a list, no? We have that list na yung binanggit ko kanina, 304, no? Yung AFP medical services personnel ang nagsagawa ng simulation training. So around this number, ang nasa sa ating listahan. And as we speak, I'm sure that it is has been prepared and ready to be submitted.
Salamat po, General.
Thank you, Rambo.
Okay, thank you, Rambo. Thank you, sir. Sir, yung isang question that was typed in by Jonah from Asahi Shimbun. Her question is, how can a member of the AFP opt and pay for another COVID vaccine when there's no vaccine available commercially? Her second question is, or follow-up, does that mean they have to wait for the vaccine to be made commercially available?
Well, sa unang tanong, kaya nga, it's an option that they can exercise. Again, the default is Sinovac because it has been certified and it has been certified and it has been given emergency use authorization by no less than our own Food and Administration. And nabanggit na rin kung bakit siya nabigyan and its efficacy rate. So nakikita natin ito ang available, mahigpit ang ating pangailangan na maturukan sa lalong madaling panahon dahil nga po tayo ang inaasahan na gaganap ng mga tungkulin na banggit ko na kanina. Kaya kailangan immediate. So ang immediate na yon available sa atin ay Sinovac. Ngayon bilang pagkilala and a little relaxing of the regulation or policy or expressed intent of the Chief of Staff, pwede silang pumili ng vaccine na gusto nila, provided that that vaccine is already available. Kung hindi siya available at kailangan niya ng mag-duty pero hindi close contact, pwede na mag-perform. Hindi siya pwedeng tumangging mag-duty, pwede siyang mag-duty, mag-perform ng duty, kagaya ng checkpoints and the likes. Pero ang gagamitin niya is yung traditional health methodology or health protocol na gagawin natin: mask, face shield, hugas ng kamay, and physical distancing. Pero dapat mag-avail siya as soon as possible. Ngayon, kung hindi siya available, as I said, balik tayo doon sa default natin. I hope I was able to address your question.
Salamat po, sir. And I think that's the final question for the day. On behalf of Team PAO AFP, sir, maraming salamat po sa ating mga kaibigan. And Major General Arevalo, any parting words before we finally conclude this virtual presser?
Okay. Thank you very much, Captain Jake and Team Armed Forces of the Philippines Public Affairs Office. Nasabi po natin na handang-handa na po ang Sandatang Lakas ng Pilipinas na tukdin yung kanyang tatlong mahalagang papel sa national bilang pagsuporta sa National Immunization Program. Ganon din po, handa na rin po tayo upang isagawa naman ang ating sariling pagbabakuna among our personnel, particularly doon po sa mga medical health frontliners at doon po sa mga kanilang pamilya at sa bilang na maaabot ng kung ilan ang may pagkakaloob sa atin na bakuna. Sa ngayon po, ang available sa uniformed personnel ay Sinovac. Tayo po ay lubos na nagpapasalamat at kumikilala doon po sa nag-donate ng bakuna para po sa amin, sa Armed Forces, upang magampanan namin ang aming mahalagang tungkulin. At kung meron pa pong gustong mag-donate, ito po ay ating lubos na pasasalamatan at kikilalanin. Magkaganon man, sinasabi po natin, hindi po tayo nakikipag-away, nakikipag-unahan o nakikipag-gitan sa ating mga kababayan upang mabakunahan. Ginagagawin po namin ang aming mga tungkulin nang naayon po sa itinatadhana ng pangangailangan para paglaban sa pandemya at kailangan po namin ng bakuna, subalit kung ano po ang available, yun po ang aming ituturok sa aming mga kasamahan. Kinikilala po natin ang kanilang karapatan but only in so far as choosing the brand of vaccine na gusto nila. But the rule is everybody must be inoculated as expressed and directed by the Chief of Staff of the AFP, Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobihana. At ang ating po mga unit commanders, ang inatasan ng ating AFP Chief of Staff na mag-monitor at siguruhin na lahat ng personnel ng Armed Forces of the Philippines ultimately, lalong-lalo na yung mga tutupad sa tungkulin ng paglaban sa COVID-19 pandemic at ang roll-out ng bakuna, kailangan po sila ay prioridad na mabakunahan. Yung pong mga dumu-duty sa mga intensive care units, sa mga quarantine facilities na tuwiran, direkta, pisikal, na humaharap sa mga COVID-19 patients, kailangan po nilang magpaturok kaagad ng kung ano ang kinakailangan at available na bakuna. If they choose to exercise their option, they must do so hoping that yung option nila is already available because they need to perform the duty in the ICUs and medical health facilities bilang miyembro ng Armed Forces of the Philippines. Umasa po kayo na kaisa ninyo ang mga babayan ng Lakas ng Pilipinas upang sama-sama at tulong-tulong tayong babangon, magtutulungan upang malabanan natin itong problemang ito ng mundo, ang pandemyang hatid ng COVID-19. Patnubayan po sana tayo ng buong may kapal, kaya po sa ngalan ng AFP Chief of Staff, Lieutenant General Sirito Subihana, tulong-tulong po tayo, kasama po ninyo at kaisa ang AFP upang maabot na natin ang malaking bahagi ng paglaban natin sa COVID-19 pandemic, ito po ang pagbabakuna. Magandang hapon po ang aming pong pagpupugay. Salamat po.
Maraming salamat, General Arevalo, sir. Akala ko tapos na tayo, Tiara.
Kasi doon lang, pinapakinggan ko kasi yung sinasabi ni General Arevalo. Gusto kong klaruin, how much time are you giving the troops who not want the Sinovac vaccine? Pag sa loob ba ng isang buwan, wala pang dumating na bagong bakuna, obligado na silang mag-Sinovac.
Immediately, Sarah, as soon the soonest time possible. Kasi hindi pwedeng defeat ng kanilang choice o pagpili yung duty na kailangan nilang i-perform.
So kung immediately, that means wala sila talagang choice. Sinovac lang talaga ang meron sa ngayon.
It may have to be that way. Pero hindi natin alam, kahit banda roon, kung darating naman din yung bakuna of their choice. So hindi na natin yung pangunahan yung aspeto na yun. But just the rule is, they should avail, everybody must have to be inoculated. The option is to choose which brand they would like. But kung magpipili sila outside of what is available, that it will not be subsidized by the AFP, they would have to pay for that.
Okay, final question na siguro yun, sir. Final question na ni Tiara. So with that, maraming salamat po. Maraming salamat, Major General Arevalo, sir. And yung nire-request po na data coming from Fake Del Mundo, we'll send it, yung latest COVID-19 AFP recovered at saka yung current status po. So with that, maraming salamat po at magandang hapon po sa ating lahat.
Thank you, Captain Jake and your team. Thank you, friends from media. Magandang hapon po.